Hi, I'm Jeannie Posner, and this is the Posner Property Perspective. As a realtor in Metro Atlanta, I've spent years helping people just like you buy, sell, and create homes that truly fit their lives. In this podcast, we'll dive into everything from home flipping tips, healthy home living, to exploring the unique lifestyles and charms of North Metro Atlanta. Whether you're a first-time home buyer, a seasoned seller, or just curious about real estate, I'm here to educate, inspire, and to guide you through it all. Because buying or selling a home doesn't have to be stressful. It can actually be fun. So let's take a fresh perspective on real estate together. And I'll see you at the closing table.
Welcome to the Posner Property Perspective. Today we're going to talk about home inspections, not just why you need to have them, but what does it truly mean to have the home inspected. I'm here with Ivan. He's going to tell you a little bit about his company, and then we're going to dive in deep into home inspections. Ivan, thank you for coming today. Give our audience a little bit of who you are and how you got into home inspections.
Okay. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Ivan Rodriguez with Accurate Inspections of Atlanta, and I've been inspecting homes since 1988. I was actually started as a home builder pretty much as a child, believe it or not. And I worked with Pulte Homes and Wheeland Homes and a smaller builder, also doing projects on my own. And in the late 80s, people just started asking me to inspect their homes. Back then, it wasn't the industry that it is today, but people that knew me knew how picky I was, how well I did things. They wanted to have their homes checked out. And then I realized that this was a growing industry and that I could make as much money, if not more, without any of the headaches of the construction industry. So I decided to get into home inspecting. And by the late 90s, I was doing that full time. And basically, a home inspection is just you hire someone like me with adequate experience, and we look over your whole house, and we basically give you a list of all the items that either are a problem or can be a problem in the future that you probably want to know about. Because, for example, let's just say like a car. If you were going to buy a used car, if that transmission was about to go out and leave you stranded in the road and cost you several $1,000s, you would want to know that before you bought that vehicle. And it's the same thing with the house. There's a lot of things that homes are perpetual maintenance items.
Yes.
The roof, depending upon the type of roof, every 10 to 30 years is going to have to be changed. And that's an expensive item. So you want to know if your roof is getting close to the end of life, because that can be a big expense. Water heaters these days tend to only last between 10 to 20 years. They used to last longer. We can get into that discussion, which is a rabbit hole.
Things were built better longer ago.
But same thing with HVAC systems. Those in the old days used to last up to 50 years. These days, they're lasting more like 15 to 25. So you need to know the age of these products and the condition. You don't want to move into a house and then all of a sudden have thousands and thousands of dollars of expenses that you were not expecting when you just spent probably almost everything you had in some cases trying to get into the house. And the good news is that home inspections, relatively speaking, are pretty affordable. And 99.9% of the time, the cost that you spend on that inspection, you're going to get it back by either renegotiating the price or having stuff fixed on the house that you would have had to have fixed otherwise. So it's almost always a win-win for the buyer to get a home inspection, provided, of course, that you're able to hire someone that actually is qualified, because there's a dirty secret in this industry about home inspectors not being qualified.
Well, especially in Georgia, because you don't have to have a license. So it's very important to find an inspector who's part of the special societies specifically for home builders who've been certified through those and do the continued edge training.
Correct. basically you want to hire somebody that is either ASHI, which stands for American Society of Home Inspectors, and you can find them at ASHI.org, or ICC certified, which stands for International Code Council, specifically for the IRC, which is the International Residential Code. And the reason why you want one of those two, and by the way, if you hire someone who is GAHI, Georgia Association of Home Inspectors, provided they're full-fledged members, they would be ICC certified as well. And the reason you want one of those two certifications is because those are the only ones that offer proctored exams. In other words, you're being monitored, because one of the dirty secrets in this industry is that, particularly with multi-inspector organizations, is the owner of the company might be certified, but he will take online exams for his employees that can't pass the exam and then claim that they're certified when they're actually not.
Yeah, so we have to watch out of it early. It's very important to use someone who's certified. I'm going to go back. You mentioned you did with the home inspection, you checked the roof. Can you tell some people, I know years ago, every home inspectors would get on the roof. Now we're getting a combination of drone or still getting on the roof. Tell me a little bit about how you and your company check out a roof.
On the overwhelming majority of homes, I actually get on the roof, or at least get up against the roof with a ladder. And there's important reason for that. I have drones. I've used drones before. A drone has a very wide angle lens, and you really cannot get the details on a drone that you need in order to do a proper inspection. In fact, I can even recall one home inspection I did where the buyer actually contracted a roof company to come out and give them a roof inspection, even though I was going to do that anyways. I don't think they were aware of the kind of inspections that I do. And that guy was using a drone and told them that everything was fine with the roof. However, the roof was actually leaking, and the vent boot at the rear of the home was bad, cracked and open. You could even see the light coming in through the attic. But that guy with this drone did not see that. But I did.
I agree. That's why you need someone, I think, getting up on the roof, looking at it, understanding if there's nails coming up and exposed, looking at what type of flashing. These are all important things. I mean, your roof, look, it's covering your largest investment. We got to make sure it's sound and no leakage going on. And when it comes to checking the HVAC, I know sometimes inspectors have trouble if it's during the winter and they're trying to check the air conditioning or vice versa. Explain to them a little about what goes into checking an air conditioning system, an HVAC.
So there's a lot involved with HVAC. There's a lot involved with all the different systems, but the HVAC system obviously is one of the more important ones in a house and one of the more expensive ones. And so you definitely want somebody qualified for that. Like you say, though, however, in the winter months, if it's, colder than 60 degrees outside, it's possible that you can't get a proper reading on that. And what I mean by that is that if you run it, you can actually damage a coil if you're running AC in weather that's too cold. And so most home inspection companies will simply make a comment saying that we couldn't test the AC due to cold weather, have it checked by a licensed HVAC professional. The difference with the HVAC professionals is that they have licenses that we don't have. And so they have the ability, because of the gases used and EPA laws about recovery and stuff, we're not allowed to check those systems and the gas levels inside the AC units, but that's something that they can do. So a lot of home buyers, in addition to our inspection, will also hire an HVAC guy. Now, if it's not, hard winter and you're getting someone that's highly qualified like me, then you're going to get a full inspection. There is one caveat to that a lot of people are not aware of, is that sometimes a seller that is aware they have, for example, a small leak in the AC unit, that coolant is leaking out, and they can charge it right before a home inspection is done. And so my inspection will say, I'll put the gun on, I'll check all the levels everywhere and every floor and get good levels. And I say, okay, it's cooling well, everything looks fine, but then a month later, all that gas has escaped from that small leak and now it's not cooling properly. And that's something that we actually have no control over, but that's one reason why some homeowners might want to consider also getting an HVAC tech to go out and check that. There's a whole rabbit hole we can go down on HVAC systems and stuff that the average person misses. I can tell you that many people are familiar in Georgia, because there's so many basement homes in Georgia, that the majority of homes with basements, the basement is not finished when the home is built. And it tends to be finished later down the line, a lot of times by a different homeowner. And I can tell you from experience that the overwhelming majority of basements are not permitted, and the HVAC systems are not done properly in the basements. And sometimes that can even be a health hazard.
Now, people are surprised. I have a listing right now, and it's a 2-story home on a full basement. There are 3 units.
Yeah.
And people have been saying, oh, why are there 3 units? Because each level has its own unit.
Mhm.
Top 2 floors are over 3,500 square feet. The downstairs alone is 2,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Yeah, each one has its own unit. So
And that's the best way to do it. These days, a lot of builders are cheaping out in their zoning systems, and they're providing a single AC for the entire house. And while that can work, it's not ideal.
that I was going to ask you about that, because I've recently sold some older homes that are split level, and they're only having 1 unit. And the
Yeah.
lower level and the top level, it's not working.
Yeah.
And so now what they're trying to do is putting a separate sensor upstairs, so that it
Mhm.
may have to work a little longer to cool off the top, but at least the top is getting cool. Level is
Yeah.
getting cool.
A lot of those homes, depending upon how accessible the ducts are, an HVAC tech can actually zone the system. They can add a second thermostat on the lower floor, and they can add damper systems in the ducts, and that can help, balance out the flow.
Yeah, but that's what we recommended to one of our clients, is putting in some more dampers
Yeah.
so that they can control it. One of the other things you inspect are hot water heaters.
Yes.
And what goes into a hot water heater inspection?
There's a lot of stuff. People would be surprised how many things we're actually inspecting on a water heater. And a lot of people are unaware of this, probably because modern technology has alleviated it a great deal. But home inspection or water heaters used to actually explode. They've actually blown up houses. In fact, I don't know if you remember the show Mythbusters. They actually
Yeah.
did an episode with that one and show it blowing through the roof, like a rocket. It's incredible the amount of force that can come from that. And that has to do with, in the old days, they didn't have what was called the TP valve, which is a temperature pressure control valve or relief valve, which is supposed to alleviate that pressure. And also these days, expansion tanks also contribute to that. And so we're checking all these things to make sure they're operable, because a TP valve can actually freeze up. And if it doesn't break free when it's supposed to because it's frozen, then that can actually still explode. So it's an important feature. And also, most water heaters are gas powered, at least in this region of the country. And the gas ones, if the vent is not done properly, can put carbon monoxide into your house. And so that could actually kill you.
And that's one of the other things y'all check for. Are there smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors?
Yes,
That goes into a report as well.
absolutely. And that wasn't required, or smoke detectors in hallways have been required for a long time, since the 70s, but it wasn't until 2008 that CO detectors became required, and that the smoke detectors in every bedroom was required. So a lot of the older homes, you'll only see a smoke detector in the hallway. And so we let people know that this is an upgrade that's recommended, but it's not required since it's an older home, it's grandfathered.
Talking about that, do they recommend it inside the bedroom or outside the door of the bedroom?
The smoke
Yeah.
detectors are required these days on new homes in every bedroom, inside the bedrooms. The CO detectors are only required one in the hall of each floor.
Now, I always find it interesting because usually they're on, a lot of people attach it to a ceiling, but doesn't gas drop?
Yes, yes. That's a good point. And that's why a lot of people will buy the plug-in ones that they stick in their outlet. Personally, I feel more comfortable with that. But those detectors are so sensitive that it's still going to go off in the ceiling. It has to do with physics and particulates. And it's, believe it or not, it's still adequate in the ceiling. A lot of
One of
testing
the
has
things,
been done to prove that.
one of the things I like to give is closing gifts are new fire and smoke detectors and new carbon monoxide detectors because they
Mhm.
need to be replaced like every 10 years. Or
Yeah, a
if
lot of
they've just
people.
been
Mhm.
replaced a year from now, maybe send battery reminders. You just closed on your house. Good time to get, a year ago, it's your
Yeah,
house anniversary, change the batteries.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware, but smoke detectors do have finite lifespans. And I mean, I've tested smoke detectors that are 30 years old and they still function fine. Like a lot of modern stuff, they come, if you read the directions, it tells you that it's only expected to last 10 years. So you have to ask your question, what's my life worth? Because it's a relatively inexpensive product.
What are some, now you probably also go into crawl spaces. What do y'all
Yes.
look for to see if they're encapsulated or what do you see inside the crawl spaces?
Oh my goodness. There's so many things we look for in crawl spaces. I remember one house that I found no less than about 8 giant snake sheds. The snakes shed their skin. And I was like almost scared crawling around in that crawl space. There were so many of them. I was like, man, am I going to get bit? And I have been run out of a crawl space by a snake before. You find all kinds of stuff down there, but there's a lot of important things that we look for. Drainage issues always show up in the crawl space, which leads to settlement issues. A lot of times there's mold issues in the crawl space. A lot of crawl spaces are not properly vented. A lot of them don't have proper vapor barriers. Structural issues you always find in the crawl space. A lot of homes won't have them, but some do. And that's where you identify those. Sometimes you can find something that's on the verge of being a serious issue that needs to be addressed, because, I've seen like pillars that were like on the edge of being off support or something.
Oh,
It's like, if we have like a small earthquake or something, which we just got one recently, actually. We do get them. They're very rare in Georgia, but it doesn't take much of one to shift just a little bit, down there because
Georgia is on a
older
fault
homes.
line.
Pardon me?
Georgia is on a fault line. We
Yeah.
don't get them that
Yeah.
often, but every once in a while you'll.
And because we're not on a fault line, we don't have any kind of earthquake codes. And all the older homes, there was not any strapping whatsoever on the structure and the foundation. And a lot of people are unaware of that. And so it's very important to find these defects and point them out.
I had inspectors because I have a thing. I don't go into attics. I don't go into crawl spaces. That's what I have inspectors for.
Yeah.
And he sent me a picture of the pillar, and there was a cedar block pillar, but it was on top of bricks and some other stuff holding it up. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't solid into the ground in cement that you would think. It had like wood boards and bricks. It was like,
Yeah.
no, this is not going to properly hold up your house. So
Yeah.
it's important to go into the crawl spaces, see what's going on. You also mentioned mold. How do y'all test for mold?
We do offer mold testing, and that's an additional fee. And almost all companies are the same. They charge additional fees because that stuff, we have to take everything to a lab. And, those technicians with the PhDs and all that, they're making most of that money. So all we do is take the samples and send them in. But, some people, if you're very hyperallergenic, it's a good idea to get the air sampling just to be safe. But most of the time, for the average person, I don't recommend it unless I see something that's an issue. And most of the time, I will know ahead of time if it's going to come back positive. With things like Aspergillus penicillium and Stachybotrys, those are very easy to visually identify. But, there's a lot of different kinds of molds, and mold is very common. Penicillium literally is in almost every single house. It's high levels that you want to know about.
Yeah, I believe in green homes, so I always recommend testing for mold, testing for radon. We haven't talked about that. People
Mhm.
say, oh, you test for radon, and they don't realize it's a test that goes on for about 48 hours.
Yeah, that's the minimum, 48 hours. The longer you conduct the test, the more accurate the test is going to be, particularly because a lot of people aren't aware of this. If there's rain, that causes hydrostatic pressure underground, and that pushes gas up. And so your readings are going to be a lot higher during or immediately after rain days. And so that can skew your results of the overall average if it happens to be conducted on rain days. And so you need to take that into account. There's a lot of times we'll come back with a result because these days everybody has short due diligence. And so you're kind of stuck, with getting the test done, in this short window of time, and you don't have a choice if it's going to rain or not. So you just have to deal with that. So sometimes we can come back with the result that's just marginally over the edge, and we'll explain to the client, we'll show them in the chart, that even though this may be slightly above 4, the fact that we had this much rain on these past 2 days, that indicates that if you see this low point, that's more where your average is typically going to be aside from the rain days. So you have to take that into account.
And I've done contracts before where we've given extension just for the radon test or mold test to come back. So there are ways that an agent, they can anticipate that and say, for all other reasons, our due diligence is over, except we're still waiting for the results back for the radon test. And, they can work that out. Right now in today's market, unlike what was going on in 20 through 23, 24, where they were like, you were lucky if you got 2 or 3 days due diligence. Yeah. Now you're seeing due diligence is typically about 5 to 7 days.
Yeah.
So the market is, it's a little unique right now. So
Yeah.
it's helpful to both the buyer and the seller because you want to know what you're buying. It's so important. And I always tell people, even during the crazy time, if you wanted to give up a home inspection, I said, don't give up the home inspection. Give up the right to ask for repairs. Do your home inspection during due diligence. If you find something that's really major, you can always opt out of the contract.
Yeah.
But you need to know what's going on with your house now and what's going to be future maintenance down the road. A lot of homeowners, if they're a first-time homeowner, they don't remember when they were a kid, what their parents were doing to maintain the house. You weren't paying attention to that. But now it's up to you to be aware. I think I mentioned earlier, we've been in our house 30 years. We're a little against the norm. Most people move every 7 to 10 years. The flex line from the clean water going into the tank in our guest bathroom, the little bolt on top going to the tank cracked and water went everywhere.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. Now that I'm speaking to plumbers, they're like, yeah, every 10 years or so, you probably just better off changing that out. Or when someone changes the components in the inside, they should change that out. And whoever last changed that one out didn't do it. Our current plumber had changed the other 2 toilets. He said, no, you see, I changed those lines when I put in the new one. I've never touched that one. So it's important to know the maintenance that you need in a home.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you make homeowners aware of maintenance-wise?
Toilets specifically, on older homes, that's, we were just talking about the smoke detectors earlier, only lasting 10 years. Toilets, those have seals that are made partly of rubber. And those dry rot, they crack, and they leak. Toilets are perpetual maintenance. Every single toilet, if it's not updated periodically, all those seals and plastic connections, they will crack and leak. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That's perpetual maintenance. So whenever I see older toilets, because I can tell, because I look in the tanks, I do thorough inspections on all toilets, and I can tell if they haven't been maintained well. And I recommend, that updating the seals, is beneficial because there's no telling how long before this is going to start to leak. And there's also other issues with plumbing, like a lot of people aren't aware of the polybutylene issue. If you have a house that still has polybutylene, a lot of insurance companies won't even insure it. And if they do, you're going to pay a lot more for the insurance. So it's important to know, because that was a recalled product back in the 80s. There were 3 generations of polybutylene. And most of the ones that are still around were 3rd generation, which was actually a reasonably good product. But nonetheless, that can still affect your insurance.
One thing that's affecting insurance right now in Georgia are the age of a roof. And
Yes.
it's really crazy that you could have a 13-year-old roof and some of the insurance companies will not give you full replacement value. So that issue has been coming up a lot.
I've been getting a crazy number of calls over the last couple of years from homeowners whose insurance companies have refused to insure them, and they need a roof inspection, and a lot of these, I don't know if you've noticed, but the tree business has gone off the roof. All these insurance companies are now demanding that you get all these trees removed from around your house, or they're not going to insure you. And people having to spend thousands of dollars removing trees.
So it's interesting. Right before this last storm hit, which was Helena, the big storm that went through, we were just doing some regular maintenance and having some limbs taken down literally the day before that storm hit. And we had all the limbs taken off. Some of them, over time, they start to grow over your house and you just got to take them down.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think even in a home inspection, you'll take note of if there's large limbs hanging over a tree from the tree hanging over the house.
Yes. And sometimes there's dead trees or trees that look like they're dying, because a tree can sometimes look like it's dying, but recover. But if we see, something that looks like it's dying, or it's posing a potential risk to the house, we'll point that out as well.
What about some of the issues you're seeing now on decks? Because I know the codes have changed over the years, and that becomes a sticky issue that someone will say, well, the deck is okay for the time the house was built, but it's not up to code now.
Correct. Yeah, we always point that out because I've literally seen decks that were falling off the house, because it's one of those things that you see and you realize that this is why those codes were changed, because of decks like this, and I don't know if you remember, but I've seen quite a few episodes on the news of decks collapsing, with people on them, and that's where all this started, because in the old days, they just used to throw some nails up, attach it to the house, and you were good to go. Next thing you know, somebody's having a party, people are jumping up and down to the song Jump, and then bam, whole thing collapses. And so it's important to understand that homes that were not built prior to 2000, those were an entirely different set of codes. In fact, most of those homes didn't even have footings for the decks, and they certainly weren't bolted properly. And a lot of them were attached to overhangs. And so they didn't have any direct load support below. And, I always point that out because, every home buyer is a different person. Some people that entertain a lot, that's going to be a much more important issue to them. Your retired couple that's not going to have any guests, if everything looks solid, you don't necessarily have to put a new beam under that deck for support if you're never going to have a large volume of people under it and everything looks solid under it. So it's a recommendation always to consider upgrading to modern codes. But depending upon how the home is used, who's living in there, it may not actually be necessary because the modern codes, to some degree, are somewhat overkill.
So someone that mentioned, we just looked at a house that was built like in 1968, and they were saying that the banister upstairs was not probably high enough and probably wasn't of code.
That's true. The railings were lower, and it's easy for people leaning against to just flip over. And also back then, the pickets were farther spaced apart than they are these days, and small children can fall between them. And so we always point that out as well. Most of the time, for most people, that's not that big of a concern, but there are, because most people that have small children, they're going to keep an eye on them or whatnot. But, there are other issues that are a serious concern, when it comes to children that people don't think about. For example, in a lot of modern homes, you'll see these small closet access doors in bedrooms or in bedroom closets that go into attic access areas. And a lot of these, what people don't understand is a lot of modern insulation looks like snow. And small children, they don't know what that is. And children love to play hide and seek. And they don't know that they can fall through ceilings. So they'll go and step, into that, and they'll just fall right through the ceiling. And I've seen some ceilings that, were 20 feet high over a garage. That child falls down there, breaks their neck or whatever. I mean, you could die. It's a serious health hazard. And unfortunately, that's not even in the code book that door needs to be secured for child safety. But if we always put those in our reports to let the client know. If they don't want to do it, that's up to them. But, I was a child. I remember being a child and playing hide and seek and looking for those places where nobody's going to find me. I mean, I know how children think, and also wanting to have hiding places for stuff. And so you have to consider that. I mean, there's nothing more valuable in your life than your children.
Yeah.
And people don't think about that.
I'm going to be honest. That's the first time someone's mentioned that. And the minute you said that, I was like, wow, just think about a kid. It's really hot up there and they close the door,
Yeah.
And that heat is so yes, you know what? I'm going to recommend that for future clients. If there's doors going to the attic, that they need to have them secured. That's a great point.
That people sometimes they don't realize, especially this is one of the biggest problems in the real estate industry is people buying new homes that don't understand how important it is to get a home inspection because they think it's a new home. I don't need it. And you would not believe what I find wrong on new homes. It's incredible. I mean, I have inspected new homes where a huge section of attic had absolute zero insulation in it and didn't even have an attic access. The two giant code violations, and yet the city inspectors are supposed to check all this. It slipped right by them. And this is not a one-off anomaly. I found this many times. It's incredible.
I recommend to my new construction buyers that we do one before the inspection, before the drywall goes up, and then one right before closing, because there are things I've seen where the intake and outtake vents for the air conditioning, the system, I didn't notice, but they're supposed to be in a certain order or certain positions.
Yes.
They were all done wrong in like 4 out of 5 rooms, had to all be changed. We had it where, for whatever reason, the house was set up to have 2 water heaters, which is unusual because the house was only like 2,300 square feet, 3 bathrooms. It's nothing, and they had the water heater connected to the wrong, I guess, breakers or something, but the water heater wouldn't turn on. Brand new, just installed, didn't function. So it's very important to have.
And you were mentioning the pre-drywall inspection. I tell people on new homes, that's actually the most important inspection. And people are shocked sometimes when they see the stuff that I find on these inspections. And it really makes me question, are these home builders having these homes properly engineered or not? Because I mean, I've literally, had to have builders come back and break concrete and pour in new footings, and put in supports where they didn't have them, and because all these modern homes, especially the larger ones that have all these big open floor plans, all that load is being transferred to other points. And that has to go somewhere. All the way to foundation for proper support. And people, particularly the city inspectors, first of all, they don't have the time to go in there with the measuring tape and trace back all these different load points, and follow them and figure out and make sure they're properly supported on every floor, because those are transferring 3 different floors or 4 sometimes. And if it's not properly supported, that's going to lead to a settling issue or a catastrophe in some cases. And that's why that is an absolutely critical inspection.
Well, as we're starting to sum up, what's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you on a home inspection?
Funny thing. Oh gosh.
And I've
Well, I
walked
don't
in
know.
on people when I've done showings, so that's not,
I don't know. I mean, I can recall laughing a lot of times for different items, but for me, it's more like horrifying than funny. I've had some crazy
that's true.
horrifying
Okay.
things. It's like I've even seen dead people.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's
Hold on. Are we talking ghost or are we talking,
no, I mean an actual
found
dead
someone
person.
oh, wow.
Yeah, it was actually in a multi-unit complex, and they weren't opening one, and we had to get the manager to come, and they needed 24 hours notice, so they had to have police present, and they came and they opened the door, and there was a body laying in the bedroom, and you could even smell that it had started decomposing, and
I
that
did
was crazy.
when I did real estate in New York, we had a co-op, and the person had died in the co-op, and nobody knew for days. So yeah,
Mhm.
unfortunately, sometimes it happens. So what the point is of that. If you have elderly or you have friends who live alone, call on them, check on them, make sure they're safe.
Yeah.
So Ivan
Yeah.
doesn't walk in and find someone
Yeah.
decomposing.
I've seen a lot, other crazy stuff too. You'd be amazed how many times I try a dishwasher and it wasn't hooked up properly and spews water out under the floor or something like that.
Well, we see that in a lot of the new homes that have been flipped. They put in new appliances.
Yeah,
The dishwasher didn't get installed correctly, or the line to the refrigerator that's going to make the ice maker wasn't installed properly.
yeah,
So yes, those are very common things that we see. So one of the things people don't realize is you guys run the dishwasher, you turn
mhm,
on the stove and oven, you're going to run some of these appliances to see how they're
yeah.
functioning. I really appreciate all the knowledge that you've shared with us today. We'll have the information about the company below so people can link to it and contact you. Like I say, it's always important to have a home inspection. Don't give that up. If you have to give up the right to ask for repairs, but you want to know what you're buying and what the future maintenance is going to be, especially for first-time home buyers who are not familiar with what it takes to maintain a home. So we really thank you for coming on today. And as I say, we'll see you at the closing table.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning into the Posner Property Perspective. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it helpful as you navigate your real estate journey. Remember, whether you're buying, selling, or just exploring the market, I'm here to help to make the process smooth, exciting, and stress-free. Let's take the next step together. Contact me today. I'd love to hear from you and make your real estate wishes come true. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, and I'll see you at the closing table.